did you, in all those different positions, did you ever develop a philosophy of leadership that guided you, some guiding principles or values that you held on to?
I don't ever think I'm the smartest person in the room. If you've done the job right, you're constantly inviting people that are smarter than you to the table. So inclusion of bright people in the decision making is incredibly important. And I would also say networking, both as an individual, but also the agency networking with its broader constituency is incredibly important. So a lot of those jobs where I was in the number one position, it's what you say from the top that helps inspire folks to head the direction you're trying to head them in, if you will. So you need to be articulate about what you're doing, but you also need to include them in what you're talking about. Because if you charge off and tell people you want to go a certain way, so I would say, and without bringing them along and explaining why, you're not going to get them there. So I think the philosophy of inclusion is there. And then there's a philosophy of immediacy. I think if you talk to any employees I have and you did that, they'd say, oh, Grace Crunican did that. And it's in public service, we have to remind ourselves that we have to keep moving ahead. Particularly public service sometimes can feel a little bit slower and not quite as quick. And so I'm constantly moving people on and trying to figure out what's going on out there that we should be incorporating into our work. So I push a little bit, probably harder
Would
than
you say that you endorse the phrase "a sense of urgency"? A lot of leadership gurus saying that you have to instill a sense of urgency in the team and getting and then accomplishing the mission. So what I'm trying to say is, it sounds to me like you're planful about leading in a way where you want to get people informed before you take on the spokesperson role.
So if you come onto one of these jobs, you have to do a quick assessment of what needs to be done there. Oftentimes you have a board or a governor or a mayor or someone that's telling you, this is what I need to do. The mayor of Seattle sat me down and said, here's 5 things I want to do. And I said, I can get to 4 of them. The 5th one, I doubt the smartness of that. And he said, what? But his deputy mayor said, boy, I like this lady because I don't like that 5th priority either. So, and it became an issue. I mean, I was square. I'm a straight shooter. So if you have a boss or someone that's got an agenda, that's one thing. But there's always an offense and a defense, okay? And when you're in, stuff happens to you, and that's the defense. And if you are managing by whatever comes in the inbox, whatever comes to you, you are not leading. You may be managing, but you are not leading because the train, there's a shooting at a station, okay? Or there's a strike, or there's something else going on that interrupts service or whatever. That's responding to your inbox. That's not getting, I don't know if people even know what an inbox is anymore, Pat, but you need to have an offense. You need to say, this is what this agency needs to do to change, where it needs to go. And as you're doing that offense, you're going to automatically need to have a defense as well, because stuff happens. It happens to you without, anything. And that's what a manager does. A manager sits there and just makes sure things are going okay. A leader says, we need to go over here. This is what we need to do. But before you go out and say to everybody, this is what you need to do, you need to talk to your staff and know what they're thinking and make observations and kind of test it a little bit. So I come on at BART as an example, and everyone has kind of had their head down and was kind of, no one wanted to take any risks or do anything because Oscar Grant had been shot by and killed by an officer. It's a horrible event. It was horrible for the employees. And my job was to lead the employees, if you will. And I understand the connection to the community and the injustice of it. But the task ahead of me was to take these employees and get back to work, get the job going, and to start looking ahead to a future. What are we going to do? We had a whole list of items. I think there were 54 in a report to address the Oscar Grant shooting and what we were doing wrong for that one. That's the defense, okay? You've got a report. You need to implement it. We need to take this seriously. I need to stand up for the injustice that happened. Okay, but that was just one little slice. If we took care of Oscar Grant and we didn't take BART to a better place, that would have been failure, right? So on the offense, you're talking to folks. So one thing I need to do is get their morale up, get them kind of right-minded for the future and talk to them about what needed to be done. And at Bard, when I started talking to folks at Bard and I started looking at reports and looking around, it was an agency that was 40 years old when I got there. And you might think, hey, that's a pretty young agency. But all of the vehicles were the original vehicles. All of the power system was the original power system. All of the track was not the original track, but there wasn't much that had been done to upgrade the system. And so one of the things that was clear to me is that we needed to regenerate and recreate the system. So I talked to folks, and before that became one of the 3 or 4 things we needed to lead on, I made sure people were in agreement with that. And then we started a plan to put together what it would take to reinvest in the system. And we started talking in terms of, hey, you're not that 25-year-old anymore shooting hopes. You're that 40-year-old, and the knees are going to go pretty quick. And with this transit agency, they started to go, and that started to affect the service. And it was really good that we'd done so much conversation about what needed to happen because we started to work toward a solution. That's just kind of one of the areas. So before I went out and said, this is the truth, this is what we need to do, I made sure people were on board inside that that's what we needed to do. And then we put a plan together.
So you're saying that you came in and a leader comes in and makes an assessment and then sort of meets with people and talks with them and makes sure that they're all kind of seeing some of the same stuff before you say, here's where
I do. I everyone does it differently, and that's totally fine. I don't presume that I'm the brightest bulb there, and because I haven't been at this agency before. Okay, the 4 agencies I mentioned that I was the head of, I didn't work my way up through those agencies. Now I had been in some of them before, not all of them, but been in and around them, so I knew what they were. But you need to figure out where the agency is. I'm just the tender of the garden. Okay, I'm there, and there's a garden. Every one of these agencies is a garden, and someone has had it before you, and they may have left it in good shape or bad shape. And the weather that comes in and stuff is the defense I talked about. But are we going to plant corn? Are we going to plant petunias, dahlias? What are we going to plant here? And what are we, so you can spend 8 years there trying to make that a better place. You need to reach some agreement. I don't come in and say, we're planting corn. Damn it, let's go. Because corn may not be their thing, right?
You have a very unique way of sharing the process of doing the assessment and coming up with some ideas, but making sure that the people that are there are going to participate in it and agree with you.
Well, that they think it's the right thing that's needed. There's a guy who, when I came in, thought I was a total waste of time. He was the head of operations. And you could just tell you walked in, he's kind of like, and he said to me, what do you offer us? I don't see because I didn't have 40 years experience in the transit industry before I was at the Great BART thing. And so probably 5 years into it, when we passed a bond measure for $3.5 billion to fix the guts of the system, he said, I think you were kind of the right person at the right time for the agency. That's as good as the compliment I ever got, But your contribution, if you just did the same thing over and over again, it doesn't make any sense. I've headed a transit agency. I've headed a mostly highway department, a city department, a federal agency. They have different purposes. So you have to listen to what's the work of the place the garden you're tending. What's the gist of the garden there?